So let me just say, for those of you who wrote 4 questions, I can tell your handwriting. So I may not answer all of your questions. And there are themes every year of what the questions are. And also, I think there are a bunch of questions I can answer in a short period of time this year. So I'll try and do that as best I can. And sorry to Alan, who's on video, but when I do this, I roam around. So, not that one. No. I'll get back. It's a longer question. I'll get back to it. Can you be a UU and answer yes when asked if you believe in God or a higher power, and answer yes when asked if you pray every day? And yes, of course, you can be a UU. I think of this place often as a spiritual container, Unitarian Universalism. Our roots are very firmly planted in the Judeo-Christian tradition. It's where we come from. We were 2 Protestant denominations that came together before 1961, but in the consolidation in 1961 is when we became the Unitarian Universalist Association. And in that time, there have certainly been, there's been a movement in that time towards a humanism, which has been evolving, which we can talk about later, and I'll address that later. But there's also, in our congregation, there are theists. There are people who have attended synagogues and then come here for the UU service. There are followers of Islam. There are pagans. There are earth-centered spirituality folks. There's all kinds of people who have different beliefs, and one of those is the belief in a higher power or God and the power of prayer. And what I always say is that I want you to find a place for your spiritual journey where you are most comfortable. So if you didn't feel comfortable here and felt comfortable at the Episcopal Church, I would want you to go to the Episcopal Church. But if you're here and you believe in a higher power and you pray and believe in the power of prayer, you are certainly welcome if you also hopefully subscribe to the values of Unitarian Universalism and try to practice them. Is that a clear answer? Is that a helpful answer? Okay. That's one. I won't do that every time. That was just for fun. I can't read this one. Oh, similar question about the conception of God. So Unitarian Universalism is a covenantal faith, which I've said at every UU 101 class I've ever done, that we are a covenantal faith and not a dogmatic faith. And so there is no dogma or creed that you must know to or subscribe to be a Unitarian Universalist. So if you, there's no commonly held creedal belief about the existence of God. And I would never from this pulpit say one way or another about that, because what my job is in part is to try and prompt you to think of what your answer to that question is. And here at UUCF and at most other Unitarian Universalist congregations, whatever your answer is, once again, if you practice hopefully the faith and values of Unitarian Universalism, is your own business about the belief of God. Can we move our service to 10:30? I know who this came from. The service times are almost entirely dictated by the time the religious education program needs to occur. And that is almost always because of the children's needs and the needs that they have actually after the services to do things in the community. So if the children's education program, religious education exploration program, grows again like it has been, we added 52 new children last year, then we would probably go back to 2 services, because the need to go to 2 services in part, I mean, if it's really packed in here, we need to go to 2 services. but it's in part based on how packed it is in the classrooms. And so, would we go to 10:30? Probably not. I hate to disappoint you, and it's not only my decision about that. So, saving that. Complicated. No, I know that. I can't actually read this one. The interpretation. I think I've answered that one. This one is, it's a question I can't really answer, but I'm going to read it. July was the hottest month ever. Climate scientists were frightened by unusual changes. What is my response? It's horrible is my response. And that it takes me a minute to just process what I think I should say. Here's what I think I should say about that, is that the climate will not improve by UUCF taking the actions that we can take. The improving climate can really only happen if governments, corporations, and the world at large, some of the biggest polluters in the world, and carbon emissions, Scott knows these things, change, if that changes. However, the things that we do at UUCF on behalf of the climate, although it will not change the rise in Earth's temperature, can be thought of as a spiritual exercise to allow us to feel like we're doing something and having a response in a way that fills our souls and fills our personal meaning to try and do something that we can. Now, when we talk about this, I've talked about this with the people who are here and I think consider themselves climate activists. I feel like there occasionally can be a sense of panic, which I don't think really helps us. But I do think we are in a place of panic because it's a horrible situation, so I understand the sense of panic. However, as Unitarian Universalists, the best we can do, I think, is to band together as best we can to raise consciousness about what's happening. And being in the DC area is to do things that will impact, I think, as best we can through USJ and other places. Yes?
Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't write it on a card.
Yeah.
But maybe it ties into the fossil fuel divestitures measure at GA.
Oh. Last night we had a very interesting conversation about that. Ed, I should ask you to come up here. There was on the ballot at General Assembly an issue about fossil fuel divestiture from the Unitarian Universalist Association in the combined, what's it called? Common Endowment Fund. In the Common Endowment Fund, to which we subscribe, and our almost $500,000 is in there along with many other people. And so one of the discussions for voting at GA was about whether we should divest from the Common Endowment Fund. We should take the Common Endowment Fund's money and divest it from fossil fuels. And that was a very difficult discussion where eventually the folks at the UUA, and this is half of this I heard last night because it's not something that I'm well studied in. The folks at the UUA have promised that they are moving in that direction, although apparently they have promised that a couple times before, and it's not the same folks. Been different folks over the years who have promised that. But I think they're trying to move that direction. And the youth and young adults were very, very vocal and supportive of the divestiture, and so there was some disappointment that the General Assembly didn't support the youth and young adults. Last night, we had a lovely get-together of the folks and delegates who went to General Assembly. It was the largest potluck we'd ever had for this event. There were 20, almost 30 of us there. And there was a very good conversation about what UUCF can do to try and move forward to support divesting from the, helping the Common Endowment Fund move forward towards divesting. And you'll hear more about that, I'm going to guess, because there were people who were at that meeting last night who said they would take on informing the congregation. Let's see. What Bruce Springsteen song best captures the mood, aspiration, and future direction of UUCF, in my humble opinion? I did not write this. And whoever wrote this, please see me later in my office. I have your money. I think Land of Hopes and Dreams, which we actually sang here one year to start the year. Grab your ticket in your suitcase, thunder rolling down the track. I know we won't be going now, but I know we won't be back. Anyway, it's a great song. Listen to it. Land of Hopes and Dreams. I wish all the questions were about Bruce Springsteen. Is your head naturally shiny, or do you put something on it? Is it you? Who wrote this? I would like all those who are follically impaired to stand with me. It's naturally shiny. The first time I've ever gotten that question. What is the size of UUCF compared to Arlington, UU Arlington? I just had lunch. Actually, here we hosted a lunch for the ministers of the 5 largest congregations in the DMV. It's Arlington, River Road, Cedar Lane, us, and All Souls. Thank you. All Souls was 1,100 members before the pandemic. They are down to 700 members. Arlington, I think, was somewhere between 800 and 900 members. I think they're down to 6-ish. 750 or 750 now? Okay. Cedar Lane is about where we are. And River Road, before the pandemic, went from, I think, close to 600 down to like 450. And now they're back up to like 520. Yeah. All of our budgets, All Souls' budget is bigger than ours. All of our budgets are similar in size. But River Road and Cedar Lane have much bigger endowments than we do. So they've been using their endowments to help support their budgets. So, let's see. I'm going to get to that. Oh, we still have plenty of time. How do we do a question? One year I had a question, do you support legalizing marijuana? It's because the person who asked the question wanted to sell legal marijuana, and they wanted me to say yes. I didn't answer that question. Do I go back and review my sermons I gave 2 or 5 years ago or longer? If yes, how have your views changed? That's a good question. Yes, every night before I go to bed, I watch one of my sermons. No, I don't do that. I watch my wife's. No, I don't do that. Yes, I periodically go back, actually, and steal from my sermons. Occasionally, I'll go back because there's something that I've preached about that I want to read about or see. And I have to answer this question sort of by the way that I talked about how I went to seminary. When I went to seminary, I had a set of beliefs, and I didn't have a language for that. And in seminary, I learned a language for that set of beliefs, and my beliefs didn't change a lot, but they were deeply influenced by what I learned at seminary. I didn't know about Christianity. I was raised Jewish. I really didn't know anything about Christianity much. And so when I went to seminary, I went to a Methodist seminary, And I learned a lot about the Christian tradition and found a lot of value in learning about that. So my thoughts about the Christian tradition actually completely changed. And so the sermons that I preached early on after that experience were centered a lot in that. However, the sermons that I now preach, I haven't changed a lot in my opinions. What I've changed is my understanding of myself, of the world around me, and what religion means to me, if that makes sense. And so that's, I think, how I've changed. There are many sermons that I've written in the past that I would never preach again. There are a few that I've preached a couple times and you haven't seen it, so. Okay. I'm going to talk about growth in just a minute. This is one question, two questions, three questions from the same person. 4 questions. I've answered those too. Let me talk about growth, because that's kind of a subject that people seem to be very interested in. There are really interesting studies for you to read. Go read the Pew Charitable Trust study on religion in America. It's very interesting. Mainline faith traditions, of which we sometimes are lumped with, have lost adherence and membership in huge amounts over the past decade. However, there are some Unitarian Universalist congregations, not many, that are growing. And I believe that one of the reasons that those congregations grow, and I've said this many times, is that they live their faith out loud. I believe that it's time for us not to be proselytizing, which means going and trying to change someone's faith to ours, but to be evangelizing, which means that for us to be more present in the community, proclaiming the good news of Unitarian Universalism. I have a friend who's a consultant, a church consultant, and one of the things he said is Unitarian Universalism is incredibly well positioned to be the faith for our time, because it's non-dogmatic, it has incredibly wonderful progressive values, and that we are, when we are at our best, because we're not always at our best, loving and accepting of those from marginalized communities and from those who have traditionally not been accepted in mainline faith traditions. And one of the reasons I'm asking you folks to go and invite folks to come here for in-gathering is so those who are, we have found something. We're all here because we found something. I am here because I found it years ago. I didn't just get born into being a minister. My Jewish mother didn't really appreciate that much. I am here because it was a saving message for me as well. My spirit was saved by becoming a Unitarian Universalist. And so there are those out there who need that. And I think it's time for us to talk to them and to live our faith out loud. And I think that's one of the few ways that we can grow. People have tried all kinds of things, advertisements and calling people who've left to find out why they've left. I mean, year after year, the same kind of things get brought up of how we do this, and I've only seen one thing that be successful, is living our faith out loud. So people can see us in the community and accept and find who we are because of that. So, what are the books I'm reading currently? They're books on management and reorganization. Next to my table, next to my bedside, which I've only read a little bit of, is the book Zealot, for those of you who've maybe heard about that. And so I just started reading that. I find the story of Jesus very interesting. I will never call myself a Christian because it's not as I have said many times, there are a lot of new people here, so I will say this for the new people. I am a Jewish, Unitarian, Universalist, agnostic, mystic, post-Christian Jesus appreciator. But I think this... Thank you very much. with a shiny head. But it's a halo. Oh, Kim, you're wonderful. But I have to tuck in my shirt. But the story of Jesus is fascinating to me because I believe that Jesus, and I've said this here, but there's lots of new people, was a radical revolutionary rabbi, right? Jesus didn't know any Christians. He didn't know any Christians. Jesus preached revolution and the institutions of the church, the institutions of Rome were evil. And I really appreciate that. And so the Jesus that I like to study is about a revolutionary hippie. I'm digging that. It's a Unitarian Universalist. All right, let me get to the Article 2 question, and that's about, I think, all I can do for today because we're at 11 o'clock. There's a lot of questions about Article 2 and the 7 principles and my thoughts about that. So here are my thoughts about that, for better or for worse. We'll see how it goes. The 7 principles now, for many of us, the 8 principles of Unitarian Universalism were not an original part of Unitarianism or Universalism. They were constructed in the 60s and changed in, 80-something, or I can't remember exactly when, because we are a living tradition, and our living tradition evolves. So when Article 2 came out and they announced they were going to do that, I looked at it critically like everyone else did. I've enjoyed the 7 principles, now the 8 principles. I've never felt a huge, deep affinity for the 7 principles myself. I think they're kind of generic in ways. I've actually really appreciated the sources. So if you go look in the front of the hymnal, you'll find the principles and the sources. And I've always really appreciated the sources part of that. And I've preached actually more about the sources than the principles. But the principles have meant a lot to a lot of people, and I get that. And as I said in my sermon on this, I was at a ministers group, and when I listened to my support group, my minister support group, talk about their belief in the 7 principles, I was surprised that there were people who are all different sides of that, right? So I haven't particularly felt that strongly about this one way or another, because I don't think it really changes the way that I will practice this faith, right? Now, the Article 2 changes, I think, are part of a generational evolution of what Unitarian Universalism means. The baby boom generation of the 60s, 70s, and 80s were centered in our congregations for a long time. A long time. And so things were a certain way, and that's totally understandable because that's who was here. As other generations now, the millennials, the Generation Xers, I forget what the most recent one is, Gen Z maybe, have come into our faith tradition, they have had influence like the baby boomers did before them in an evolution of what Unitarian Universalism could or may look like. Hence, the language of the Article 2 is a reflection in many ways of the desire of a newer generation of people to evolve this living tradition to a place where the language reflects more of the future of Unitarian Universalism, in their opinions, than of the present or the past. I don't begrudge anyone for that. I don't think that it's not the UUA. I've heard that so many times. I know people at the UUA. I know many people at the UUA. They come out of congregations. They are lovely, hardworking people who are doing the best they can. There's no monolith who are going to come and try and hold us accountable. That's a fallacy. They don't have the money, time, or resources to do anything like that. So anyway, so I believe that Article 2, and it's a worthy discussion to have, is just another evolution in the process of how we as Unitarian Universalists see the words around the values of this faith tradition for which we're trying to live. So I'm sorry that it's been a difficult and conflictual subject for many folks. I think folks who've been around for a long time, it feels like there's a lot of people who are upset about it. And there's a lot of folks here who haven't been around for a long time, who don't know much about this at all and probably don't care much about it that much. And so, part of my job is to try and balance all those needs. And actually, all of my job is trying to balance all these needs and to figure out as best we can how to support the living of the core of our faith no matter what the words say. And that's what I try to do. I am supportive of the new language in part because I'm supportive of us moving forward. I don't think that removes the 7 principles or the 8 principles from our lives. I think they still exist. No one's banning them. And that's the best answer I have for that question. Anyway, thank you all for your questions. They're always fascinating. I appreciate the fact that you even stay for my answers because, I will say, I wasn't going to say this, but of course I shouldn't there. Somebody once left, early on in my ministry, somebody left the congregation because they said, why does he stand up there and think that he gets to tell us what he thinks? And I said, well, that's what you pay me to do. I don't know what else to do. So I'm appreciative of the fact that you are interested in what I have to say. I try to live this. I try to live this faith as best as I can and help guide you in it. And I am grateful to be here. So thank you.